And Governor, let me read exactly what you said to the Nashua Telegraph. You said, looking at the Massachusetts experience, it would not be one I would want for the country to follow any further. You talked about how it was completely propped up by federal money, and that's why it was, quote unquote, working, and that it shouldn't be a model. Explain.
Well, let's give Massachusetts credit for what they did accomplish, Chuck, on the positive side. They expanded access to health care to those in need, and that's one of the goals that we have as we try to reform health care. But we also, in this era now where we're very concerned about government debt at the federal level, at the state level, have to be mindful of the costs of these programs. And I'm not criticizing Mitt Romney. He hasn't been governor for 4 years. I mean, I'm sure if he had been governor now during the ensuing 4 years, he would have taken additional steps to control costs. But most serious studies of this program show that it did not fulfill the promise of controlling costs, and we live in an era where the debt and government spending is a big issue and needs to be contained.
Given how folks feel, particularly in your party, about this health care reform bill, do you think that Governor Romney is vulnerable on this issue because he supported the Massachusetts plan?
Governor Romney is a friend of mine. He's a very sharp individual. He's somebody who I think is extremely capable leader, and so I have a high regard and good deal of respect for him. And I'm sure had he been governor these last 4 years, he would have made some adjustments to this program. But again, he hasn't been there for 4 years. I think in light of some of the concerns about costs and other aspects of the program, I'm sure he would have made some adjustments.
Now, Governor Pawlenty, in Minnesota, you guys have, I believe, 5 public plans that cover about 10% of the population. And those plans, and Minnesota is one of these states that doesn't have a lot of uninsured because of these plans. Why shouldn't the federal government, though, try to make it so that somebody living in Mississippi or Texas who doesn't have health care, places where there are higher levels of the uninsured, try to figure out how to fix this issue so that, you know, of somebody living in Minnesota who has better access to health insurance can get similar access?
Well, there's a number of answers to that, Chuck. I'll give you a few. The first is, what is the proper role of the federal government? It's defined in the Constitution. They're not supposed to be involved in every aspect of every, domestic issue. So there are some things the states should primarily be responsible for. States are allowed to then innovate, and they're a little more nimble, smaller in size. They can do things quicker. They tend to be more reform-minded. So it's better that some of these issues do play out at the state level. That's number one. And then number two, the way that you do this is very important. I believe, and I think most Republicans and conservatives believe, we should empower individuals. If they need some financial assistance, to the extent we can afford it, great, but give them the voucher, give them the tax credit, and put some guardrails up to protect them in the marketplace. But let the marketplace work. That's different than the federal approach.
In fairness to this plan, it does have tax incentives for people to buy in these state exchanges. I mean, I'll be honest, some would argue what you're describing is exactly what the president signed into law, at least pieces of it.
Well, I think, Chuck, this plan has a lot of negative features to it, and you know what they are. Of course, it raises taxes massively. It's a huge individual mandate, which is overreaching from a federal government standpoint. It has a cost structure that I believe is unsustainable. It's going to drive the country further into debt, and it has the federal government, I think, micromanaging the big parts of the healthcare economy. So those are all negative features that I and others don't like.
You say the individual mandate that's in the health care law is an overreach. Do you think it's unconstitutional?
Well, that's the legal issue that I think I and many others would like the courts to address. I've asked my Attorney General to join the lawsuit to challenge that very point, Savannah. And now you have the federal government demanding, in fact requiring, under threat of penalty or fine, that Americans buy a good or a service for no other reason than they're alive. And that's an unprecedented overreach, according to the Congressional Budget Office in a report that they wrote themselves in the 1990s.